In recent months, international voices calling for the recognition of a Palestinian state have grown louder than they have been in years. Several governments, including some of Israel's closest allies, have either moved toward or openly discussed the possibility of formally recognizing Palestinian statehood. Supporters say such recognition would help pave the way for peace, restore hope for Palestinians, and balance decades of political disadvantage in negotiations. But despite this growing global clamor, the reality on the ground tells a very different story. The establishment of a viable, fully functional, independent Palestinian state remains a distant prospect. The reasons for this are complex and deeply rooted in history, politics, security, and geography. For many decades, the idea of a two-state solution, Israel and Palestine living side by side in peace, has been a centerpiece of international diplomacy. It has been endorsed by the United Nations, supported in principle by many Israeli and Palestinian leaders at various times, and embraced by most of the international community. However, repeated attempts to achieve it have failed, leaving the Palestinian territories divided, the peace process frozen, and trust between the two sides shattered today. Palestinian statehood is hindered by a number of deeply entrenched obstacles. The first is territorial control. The land historically envisioned for a Palestinian state, the West Bank, Gaza Strip, and East Jerusalem, is fragmented and politically divided. Israel controls significant parts of the West Bank through settlements, checkpoints, and military presence. Gaza, ruled by Hamas since 2007, is under a tight Israeli-Egyptian blockade and has experienced repeated wars. East Jerusalem, which Palestinians claim as their future capital, is under full Israeli control. The second major obstacle is political division among Palestinians themselves. The two main factions, Fatah and Hamas, remain deeply divided in both ideology and governance. Fatah, led by Mahmoud Abbas, runs the Palestinian Authority and maintains some cooperation with Israel in the West Bank. Hamas, considered a terrorist organization by Israel, the US, and the EU, controls Gaza and rejects Israel's right to exist. This division has prevented the formation of a unified Palestinian government capable of representing all Palestinians in negotiations and delivering on agreements. Another challenge is security concerns from Israel's perspective. Many in Israel's political and military leadership believe that an independent Palestinian state, especially one that includes Gaza under Hamas control, would pose an unacceptable security threat. They point to past rocket attacks, tunnel infiltrations, and militant activity as evidence that Palestinian independence could lead to greater instability rather than peace. As a result, Israel insists on strict security arrangements, including the demilitarization of any future Palestinian state, a condition that Hamas and some other Palestinian groups reject. Say in addition to these political and security issues, there are legal and diplomatic complexities. Recognition of a Palestinian state by some countries does not automatically make it a functioning reality. Statehood requires not just recognition, but also effective governance, economic stability, defined borders, and the ability to maintain law and order. Right now, the Palestinian territories lack many of these elements. Internationally, the situation has shifted in recent years. Frustration with the lack of progress in peace talks, especially during and after repeated conflict. However, critics of unilateral recognition warn that it could have the opposite effect. Without a negotiated agreement, recognition might harden positions on both sides. Israel could respond by accelerating settlement expansion or taking other measures to consolidate control over contested areas. Palestinian factions could interpret recognition as validation of their strategies, reducing incentives to compromise. The humanitarian crisis in Gaza is another urgent factor in this debate. Years of blockade, conflict, and political isolation have devastated infrastructure. crippled the economy, and left millions dependent on aid. International agencies warn that living conditions are deteriorating rapidly, with shortages of clean water, electricity, medical supplies, and food. Many global leaders see the creation of a viable Palestinian state as part of the solution to this humanitarian disaster. But humanitarian aid alone cannot solve the political conflict. For Gaza and the West Bank to become part of a viable state, there would need to be a lasting political settlement that addresses core issues: borders, security, refugees, the status of Jerusalem, and mutual recognition. Without this, even the most generous aid programs will only provide temporary relief. In 2024, the Beijing Declaration attempted to address Palestinian political divisions. Signed by multiple Palestinian factions, including Hamas and Fatah, it called for national unity and a shared strategy for achieving statehood. The declaration outlined a plan for a transitional government that could lead to elections and unified governance. However, the ongoing war in Gaza, distrust between the role of the United States remains crucial. Traditionally, the U.S. has acted as a mediator. Although its credibility has been questioned by many Palestinians due to its close alliance with Israel, changes in U.S. policy, whether toward greater support for Palestinian rights or stronger backing for Israel, have significant influence on the pace and direction of the peace process. Looking ahead, the question is not whether there is international support for Palestinian statehood, clearly. There is, but whether the conditions exist to make such a state viable. Recognition without actual sovereignty, territorial continuity, and economic stability may create the appearance of progress without delivering real change. For Palestinians, statehood is not just a political goal, but a symbol of dignity, self-determination, and an end to decades of occupation and displacement. For Israelis, any peace agreement must guarantee security, recognition, and stability. Reconciling these needs will require more than statements of support from abroad. It will require a fundamental shift in attitudes, trust building, and the political will to make difficult compromises. Until then, the dream of a viable Palestinian state will remain just that, a dream. And while the voices calling for its creation grow louder, the realities on the ground continue to push that dream further out of reach. The challenge for the international community is to turn symbolic gestures into practical steps, to bridge the divide between aspiration and implementation, and to ensure that both peoples can envision a future where peace and coexistence are more than just diplomatic slogans.